Hey everybody, it's Lon.TV, and we're taking a look today at a portable display from Wimaxit. We looked at one of their other ones a few months ago. This one's kind of neat though because it has essentially a USB Type-C hub built in, and it works with the Nintendo Switch. The Switch right now thinks it is docked, but it is in fact just plugged into the display. In addition to the Switch, you can plug in your USB Type-C equipped computers and tablets. In many cases, you only need a single USB-C cable to get it to work, and it also has HDMI inputs on it as well. Costs about $289 as you see it. So a lot of compatibility here, which is not something we typically see with a portable display. So we're going to be taking a closer look at it in just a second with some quirks that you might run into along the way, including why I'm using a stand with it. Now, I do want to let you know, in the interest of full disclosure, this came in free of charge from Wimaxit. However, all the opinions you're about to hear are my own. Nobody is paying for this review, nor has anyone reviewed or approved what you're about to see before it was uploaded. So let's get into it now and take a look at what this display is all about. So let's take a closer look now at the hardware. This is a 15.6-inch display, IPS. It runs at 1080p at 60 frames per second, so it should work well with computers and game consoles and video players and whatnot. One thing to note, though, with these USB-powered displays is that they are not all that bright. This one isn't bad. It's a little brighter than the Zen screen, but it will be noticeably dimmer than what your laptop may have built in, just because it doesn't get a lot of power brought into it. It can't power a bright enough backlight to give you that same level of brightness. But I did find, again, this one is slightly brighter than my Asus Zen screen and is pretty nice to look at under most lighting conditions, but just bear that in mind. Now, like many portable displays, this has a built-in cover that doubles as a stand. However, the stand function here is terrible. In fact, the documentation doesn't really reference it at all, and you're just expected to kind of balance it up here like so. And I was confused as to how to use it, and I actually bent part of it when I was getting it set up. But the device here continually flops over. It doesn't hold itself up very well, as you can see. And if you want to use the touch display features of this, because it will work as a touch display on Windows, you'll be knocking it over all the time. So I think you'll want to use a stand like I have here just to give you a little bit more stability with it. The cover works well as a cover, but not as a stand. The device itself, though, is mostly made out of metal, so that was nice, although they glued the cover here onto the back of the device. So the cover is always with you, whether you like it or not. But again, I think a stand investment would be a sound one in this instance. You have some controls here on the side to adjust brightness and whatnot. There are a few HDR modes, as you'll see in a few minutes. It does have the ability to take HDR in and display it properly. We'll test that on the iPad in a few minutes, but you might find yourself in those menus jumping around a bit. I did find the navigation to be a bit clunky on it, so you might want to spend some time just kind of getting used to it. I found the brightness level was only at 50% when I hooked it up by default. So the first thing you'll want to do is go in and turn the brightness up to get the full potential of the display. Now you'll notice here there is a micro USB port. This is a port for connecting up an OTG adapter, which I'll show you in a few minutes. So what you can do is hook up a keyboard and a mouse, for example, into the display and then have it work on your computer. And this will be very useful for single port devices, which we will also be talking about in a few minutes when I demo the display. And I'll show you how that port works when we get to that part of the review. On the other side, you have a headphone jack here. There's also speakers built in. Not the best speakers, but if you want better sound, hook the headphones up there. Now, it's a little confusing as to the USB-C ports that it has here. So this port here that's labeled Type-C is the port that you connect to your computer. Now, if your computer cannot supply enough power to the display, then you'll need to connect its USB-C power adapter to the power connector here. And the cool thing is that when you do that, putting your laptop's power supply in here, it will actually send power back out to the laptop over the other Type-C connector. You'll see that with my Surface Go in a second. This is also how you will connect up the Nintendo Switch. The Nintendo power adapter goes in here, and then the power will come back out over the Type-C connector while the Switch sends the video in through that very same connector. We'll demo that in a minute too. And that's a really nice feature to have on here, especially if you have a single USB-C port device like a phone or a tablet or something like that. Next to those Type-C connectors are two mini HDMI inputs. They will give you a HDMI cable in the box to connect up a full-size connector to this smaller one, but these are not hard to find. You can get many mini HDMI to full HDMI cables and adapters on Amazon and other retailers, so you shouldn't have any problem making use of these ports, but you will need to make sure that you have power connected up when you are using the HDMI on here. So you've got 3 video inputs, USB-C and 2 HDMIs. And now what I want to do is show you how all of this works. We're going to start with my Surface Go tablet. We'll then take a look at the Nintendo Switch and make some other recommendations too. So let's take a look at my Surface Go here and connect it up to the display. Now this device has only a single USB-C connector on board, and I'm finding not every computer I test this with has enough juice to get the display to work reliably. So you're going to see it blinking on and off here because it's not able to get enough power through this cable on its own. It worked okay with my Mac, but not with the Windows device. So what I'm going to do now is plug in this power connector from my Surface Go, or just one of my random USB-C power connectors, into the side of the display here, and that has provided us with a much more reliable power connection here to get this to work. So the touchscreen does work on here, as you can see. I can go ahead and do some simple math here with the calculator and be able to use that on the second display. But again, just be prepared. You might need a secondary power source if you are leaving the house. And what you could do if your computer doesn't provide enough power is plug in one of those USB backup batteries, provided it can provide 2 amps of power. That's typically what you would need out of a tablet charger. You could plug that USB power adapter into the power USB port on here and you're good to go. If you're curious as to how many touch points are on here, there are 10 as I claw the display here. You can see how that works. This app, by the way, is called Display Tester. It's free on the Windows App Store, so you can see how many touch points your own display has. But as far as a Windows Touch display goes, this works pretty nicely. This did not work on my Mac, of course, so I think it's going to be Windows only for touch, but that is a pretty nice little feature to have with it. All right, so let's check out the USB-OTG adapter for connecting up a keyboard and trackpad through the display here. These little adapters are very inexpensive and they allow you to plug in a full-size USB port even when you have just a micro USB port on your compatible device. People use these a lot with Android phones and tablets. So what we're going to do is just plug this in to the other side of the display here, and then we're going to connect up this Logitech wireless transceiver, which works with my keyboard and trackpad combo here. So now that that's connected, again, to the display, we should see my mouse pulling up here. Yep, there it is. And I'll pull up a window here so you can see everything moving around here. But there you go. It looks like the keyboard and trackpad works through the USB port here on the display. So in many ways, this display is kind of like a USB-C hub that we reviewed in other videos, where you get power going back to the device, you've got display going out, and you can attach additional USB devices all through a single cable here. So it works pretty nicely, provided you have enough power going into the display to begin with. Let's take a look now at the Nintendo Switch. All right, so we've got my Nintendo Switch here running in tablet mode. Now the display has my Nintendo Switch power adapter plugged into that USB-C power port, and then we've got our display connector here. And what I'm going to do now is plug that display connector into the bottom of my Switch. You'll see the display here is now off, and we should see it coming up on screen here, as you can see, and I can jump back into my game, hopefully, and start playing like we were before. And there you go. You can see we've got Mario playing Smash Brothers here, and we are pretty much using this Switch like we would on a dock, but without the dock. It's getting power. If we hit the home button here, it's getting power through that power connector, and the display is going out. Now remember, this only, though, will work with the official Switch power adapter. If you plug in a different USB-C power adapter, it doesn't work at all. It just stays blank on you there. Now, a couple of things to note here on the overall image quality. What I noticed is that the response rate of the display seems to be rather slow. You're going to see a lot of blur when you're playing games like this one where you've got a lot of animation on screen. It won't be perhaps as sharp as some of those gaming displays that have very low response rates. I don't know what the response rate is on this one. They didn't list it on the specifications, but you will see a lot of blur as things are moving around on screen quickly. But if you are looking for a way just to have a nice portable thin display to carry around with you to work with your Switch, this isn't such a bad way to go. Now, one thing that surprised me about the display is how minimal its input lag is. We hooked up my analog NT Mini to one of its HDMI ports. I pushed a button and we shot the screen at 240 frames per second to see how long it took for that button push to register on screen. And we got an input lag of only 44 milliseconds, which is identical to my Samsung gaming monitor that we use as our control device whenever we're doing these kinds of tests. It's a very good result for something that I did not expect to do as well as it did. So I think if you are looking for a gaming usage for this device, it should actually do pretty well at that from an input lag perspective, but again, not so great on the pixel refresh rate. Image quality overall, though, looks good. Again, you're going to have some blur issues here, but the IPS display here has nice color. The Switch games look really, really nice on this, as do a lot of my PC stuff as well. So I was pleased with that. It's not going to be something for creative professionals to use, but it does look good enough for the kinds of things you would use one of these portable displays for. The sound on the speakers isn't spectacular, but it's good enough for getting around the display with some friends to play games. You'll get, of course, better sound quality out of the headphones when you plug it in. But overall, not bad, I think, for what this display is all about. Again, a little brighter than the Asus Zen screen, and beyond just that response rate issue, I think it's a pretty nice display for playing your games on. Now, I found some mobile devices do work with the display. My iPad Pro here, which has a USB-C connector, was able to work with it without having to plug in a separate power source. We are powering the display now completely from my iPad here. Touch display doesn't work here, as you can see, but you can pop around and get into different things on here, so that seems to work. One thing I had to do with the iPad, though, was manually adjust the display on it, because it does have some degree of HDR compatibility. So I think if you're plugging in perhaps a 4K Blu-ray player or 4K device, although you won't get 4K output, it might actually work with the color modes there. I had to force this into this HDR 2084 mode for the iPad to appear, but it does look a little washed out to me even with that setting. The colors look really off when that mode was set to auto. So there's a lot of little glitchy things with this that might throw a wrench in your enjoyment of it. It does support a lot of different things. On the PC side, it also supports Freesync if you have an AMD device to connect up with it. So it supports a lot, and I think you might have to go in and tweak some settings to get everything to work properly. But if you do that, I think you'll have a pretty good experience with it. And I was very pleased to see how well the Nintendo Switch worked with it, because that was a kind of a surprise, actually, to be able to just plug the Switch in and get charging to work and have display output working with it as well. The big issue, though, with it is this horrible stand that it has, especially if you want to touch the screen when it's connected up to a Windows device. You're going to have some issues with it because it's just flopping around back here. You kind of have to balance it, and you touch it once and the whole thing's just going to fall over. I also had a bit of a quality control issue with mine. You'll notice here that it's got some electronics that are part of the product that are screwed in here. And it looks like when they were screwing this side down, they added some pressure marks to the display that are hard to see on camera, but something I'm noticing. So you might want to just take a close look at yours when you get it out of the box and make sure the display looks okay to you. I'm not seeing a lot of issues with bleed through or anything like that, but I am noticing some pressure marks lining up exactly where those screws are on the back. So that was the only thing that I noticed there with mine, but it could just be that they sent me kind of a B grade for the purposes of the review here. So overall, not bad. It's a little quirky. You got to get around some of those quirks. I do recommend getting a tablet stand kind of like this one to prop it up when you're out in the field, but I just like the connectivity options that you have here. 2 HDMI, you've got all the USB-C options, and of course the Switch compatibility as well. So not bad here at all. Let me know what you think down in the comments below, and until next time, this is Lon.TV. Thanks for watching.
This channel is brought to you by the Lon.TV supporters, including gold level supporters Chris Allegretta, the Four Guys with Quarters podcast, Tom Albrecht, and Kalyan Kumar. If you want to help the channel, you can by contributing as little as $1 a month. Head over to Lon.TV/support to learn more. And don't forget to subscribe. Visit Lon.TV/s.